You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode. Today's episode is sponsored by Scayle Commerce Engine and Swap. More about them later. So let me set the scene before I introduce you to our wonderful guest today, who I had the pleasure of working with on a large technology evaluation project at FatPhase. But our topic today is a critical one around anybody who's involved in e-com strategy, digital transformation, technology change. It's about running efficient project teams and product roadmaps. And it's a skill that isn't always present in every business. And sometimes you'd be surprised, even in some of the bigger businesses, it's not necessarily there in a structured way. So the concept about this is to run project teams and product roadmaps effectively. You've got to have multidisciplinary skills. You've got to be able to run teams. You've got to be able to run and motivate them as well. You've got to plan roadmaps, understand what a roadmap is and a product strategy is. You've got to be able to put business cases together. And you've got to bring in multiple stakeholders and therefore manage those stakeholders. You've got to be able to influence up and down the chain, up to board level presentations. There's loads of different capabilities. So we're going to tease through from a highly experienced person about what that really means. So a warm welcome to Kaylie Mitten, who's now Digital Optimisation Lead at B&Q. Hey, Kaylie, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, good. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've been looking forward to this because I loved working with you. And I know you've got an absolute stack of experience. And what I love it is you're always opinionated in a really positive way about what good looks like. So I think our audience will learn a lot from you today. So before I ask you loads of questions, do you want to give people a bit of a flavour, like who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, of course. So love living down the South Coast, make the most of being really, really close to the sea. And I've loved digital for as long as I can remember. So I've been working in digital for over 10 years now, different kind of roles, but pretty much all centred around product management. Effectively, and also within many sectors. So I think that's one of my kind of superpowers is that I can pick knowledge and bits of areas and bits and pieces and pull them together. So I've been utilities or financial services and retail as well. And I've worked across transformation programs, optimization, experimentation, and BAU projects. So quite expansive in terms of my reach. But I think all of that has built up to a certain level of understanding and a bit of a toolkit that I take around with me everywhere I go now. And at the moment, that's currently B&Q. So been there for 10 weeks now and really enjoying getting to grips with that business and understanding where those areas of opportunity lie.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that really struck me when we started working together at FatPhase is just how broad your skills are, because you find some people in product management who are very good at technical product management, but they haven't got that wider business strategy experience. And I think it's so important, that ability to know what's important and what you need to prioritize versus what is noise. So we're going to split this into two, right? We're going to talk, I guess, more about project teams, project management stuff before we get into the product management side of it. So at the starting point for me is, what's the anatomy of a good project team structure for you? Like what is critical in terms of roles, capabilities, and making that team work together?
It's a really difficult one because I think it depends on what you want to try and achieve. I don't think there's a one size fits all. So I think, first of all, the most important thing is to really break it down, understand what you want to try and achieve, and then the roles that you need to be able to do that successfully. But regardless of that, you also do need a strong leader in that. You need someone that can facilitate collaboration, really understand strengths and weaknesses of people, bring people together, really support collaboration, be a really great listener as well, because I think sometimes you can have leaders that pretend to listen and then just continue going on their own path. It's about really making the use of the skills and expertise that you have within your toolkit effectively. But also be confident in decision making. I'm sure, James, you've been in situations where you find it really hard to get a decision from a leader and they flip flop quite a lot. So you need to be confident, I think, in making your decision and sticking to it, but really backing that up with the right data and insight to make sure you're making the right call. But in terms of wider team, like a mix of abilities and skill set is really important. So I don't think it necessarily means that you need always, heavy weights in a discipline. I think a great mix is really beneficial. But also, I see the massive value in actually bringing your frontline colleagues into that project team. So sometimes you can create a project team and they do a bit of a ta-da moment back to the business users and go, hey, created this great thing for you. Ta-da, here it is. Well, there's a huge amount of value in actually getting the people that are on the front line, working with that tool, working with customers, speaking to people day in and day out to be part of that. And they can bring a huge amount of insight and influence into there to make sure that your product that you're developing, your project that you're developing is going to hit the nail on the head. So I've done it before where in EDF Energy, we had call center staff working with us on what our kind of brochure experience would look like. Just they speak to people day in and day out. They understand what people are looking for when they're looking at energy tariffs and comparisons. So they were able to kind of really help us in that space to ensure that we're creating the right journey and experience. But also, I think as well as like kind of a mix of abilities and skill set, they need to gel, they need to get on, because that's the most important thing. You're going to be stuck with these people for a considerable amount of time. So there has to be a really good kind of, I guess, level of banter and getting on and gelling to really kind of make sure that being as productive as possible. If you don't get on with someone, you won't want to spend time with them. If you don't want to spend time with them, then you're not going to collaborate and get the best out of each other. So yeah, super important.
Hi, I'm Thomas, Director Growth at Scayle. The world's fastest growing e-commerce platform has landed in the UK, with global brands like Manchester United, Deichmann, Snipes and Marco Polo trusting us to scale their commerce businesses. Are you ready for a new e-com experience? Talk to Scayle today, because life is just too short for painful commerce.
I really like that answer because there's lots of good points there, but a couple of ones I think are underestimated, those soft skills. So the listening one, because you're right, the art of a good project leader is picking up when there's disquiet or when someone might not be feeling so confident or maybe feeling they're not being valued, and making sure that they don't then become a disruptive presence. And I don't mean that in a negative way to them, but if you're not motivated or you're not confident, you will be a disruption in the project. So that is critical. And then the other one, decision making. And I think the thing that sometimes people mistake is the need to make right decisions all the time. Is sometimes you need to make a decision and explain the rationale and learn from it. And if the decision is wrong and you learn through new information and data, then pivot and fine. But if you don't make a decision, you lose weeks in a project.
Yeah, exactly. But also as a leader, I think there are times where you feel like you have to make a decision and you're not set up properly to do so. So you need to be strong enough to call out, I haven't got everything I need here to make a decision, and this is what I'm going to need. I think it's a really important skill to have and to possess as a leader.
Oh, 100%. Admitting that you're not like Iron Man and can solve every problem in the world, and being able to turn around and say something, hey, look, you've got more experience in this area. I want your opinion. Make them feel good about themselves as well, that you value their input. So it moves me on to the next question. Is project success is massively influenced by like current processes and how easy it is to get things done, by the people and culture, personalities, and tech. And we all know that people in tech are prone to like spontaneous combustion. In your experience, like what can go wrong in a project and how can you kind of minimize the risk of it going wrong?
Oh God, like everything can go wrong. Let's be honest, anything.
Let's pick up It's a correctly worded question. What are some of the biggest things that you think can go wrong, and how would you take steps to like reduce that?
Do you know what? Before you go into any project, the most important thing is to understand which kind of three sides of your project management triangle are the most important. So when it comes down to scope, budget, and time, you can't have all three eloquently. So you can only really focus on the two, and the other one has to kind of bend a little bit to make way. So it's understanding which of those are important. Most of the time, don't know if you're the same, but a lot of the projects that I do, it's going to be cost and it's going to be time, and then the scope you kind of you can break down and compromise on. But that's so important because that's the foundation of your project. You understand that, then you can know exactly where you can flex on what the business is willing to flex on. But also, I think it's about taking the right time to do things up front. So I think sometimes you can jump straight into a project and you be focused on the delivery of that project. You don't think about why you're doing it in the first place and what you're trying to fix. So really understanding your problem statement and exploring that with proper time for discovery is so key. Because if you can do that thinking up front, it means you get a better product at the end of it. So taking time to, really understand your customer, what the need is, or if it's a business need, is really, really important. But also, I think it's also some businesses and companies, they can be their own worst enemy, because they can go into things without having the right tool set or knowledge, and they just go straight into it. So the really good example, when we were working together at Fatface, we knew that we had a bit of a knowledge gap in terms of, platforms, core e-commerce platforms. And that's why we reached out to you guys to help us with that analysis. So I think it's understanding as well what you've got that works really well and what you need to supplement with. Not all businesses are superhuman and know everything and have everything they need. So it's about picking these bits together and building a really robust view of what you need to take forward, being aware of your, where your fall downs are, and supplementing with third parties or additional training, whatever that might be. But again, the other thing that I'm a really big kind of believer in is test and test again. Just keep testing it. So, there's so many times where you deliver a project, it just doesn't hit the mark. Things are always forgotten that are hygiene factors. So things like which mobile keyboards you're triggering for certain fields. It really annoys me when you go into like a mobile field and they're triggering an alphanumeric keyboard. I mean, that's just basic. So spending time on those seemingly kind of hygiene pieces is really, really important to make sure that you're getting the quality that you want there as well.
Swap is the e-commerce operating system powering brands looking to scale, from shipping, tracking and package protection to returns and cross-border. Swap improves every pain point in your operations journey, trading your tech stack for the one system that can manage it all. This is e-commerce evolved. Yeah, I fully agree with. I sound like a robot, and how repetitive I am with saying to people, get your basics right before you think about all that elaborate. Okay, you want to put in a new AI chatbot, great. You don't have it today, so it's not a lot. Yeah. But fundamentally, you've got flaws in your data model. Fix those stuff. And that's why I love the point you made about scope, because for me, this comes up front. Because if you start getting into a project without having a scope, it gets really messy, because then it's, we want this, and then everyone goes Moscow, must have. And you're like, oh, this isn't prioritization. and try and get in everybody before you get in workshops, geared around a scope definition. This is what our vision for the scope is. We might evolve it during the project, but we are not doing X, Y, and Z. It cuts out so much wastage, doesn't it, in time?
So much wastage. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes you focus, because I think, and also doing that all together just means you're all starting off on a level playing field. Otherwise, you've got people working to different targets to you, and then you don't work cohesively as a team. So yeah, you're right. It's such an important foundation.
Yeah, and also if you're clear up front about I've got a project at the moment which is a migration over to Shopify, and it's the premise of it is we are not doing any redesign at all. We are simplifying this, we're lifting and shifting from a UX point of view. We're just fixing known bugs and issues, but we're not doing any new rebranding, because we want this to be a clean technology swap to measure the impact of the migration. Then any like updates to brand and design and user journeys can be done in a second phase. And having that transparent up front means that you haven't got internal creatives, you haven't got agencies going, oh, look at this beautiful stuff we can do. He's like, we don't want to talk about that. Yeah. We want to focus on that a little bit.
And then you can deal with scope creep really well, because if you've defined it, it's easier to point to something and go, hey, this is going a little bit, wayward here. We need to bring it back in. I think if you've not done that up front, scope creep happens all the time, and then your costs are going up and your time's going up, and it's really hard to kind of keep up with it.
Yeah, that's when your triangle goes basically.
Exactly. It becomes a Peppa Pig muddy puddle, and that's where you end up. Yeah.
No, that's the first time I've heard it called that. That's a new analogy for e-com project management. Peppa Pig's muddy puddles.
There you go.
You touched on an interesting thing for me, and about external specialists, consultants, third parties. Yeah. And this is not a sales pitch, in case anyone listening is worried, because I'm also very transparent when I don't think an external consultant is needed and will add unnecessary cost and complexity. And you don't need them, just focus on the existing teams and agencies. But I'd love to hear from your point of view to give people advice. Is how do you make sure external people, whether it's a consultant like me or it's a third part, an SEO technical specialist, how do you make sure they are adding value to the project rather than distracting it?
I think it's being really, really clear with what they're here to do. So I think you have to your point, James, sometimes needed, sometimes not. And I think there's different reasons for that. So it could be that you've got a knowledge gap and you need to supplement that. It could be that you need external viewpoint to add clout to what you're saying. So I think upfront when you're starting to explore what you might need, understanding what the need is really important, and be really open with your consultants that you're going to engage with to kind of talk that through, but also be willing to listen to them and really be open to how they would shape it and how they can support you. Because I think you can come in with a preconceived idea. They've done this time in, day in, day out with lots of different people. So actually they might have a different viewpoint. So I think have an initial view, but work on it together. But for me personally, to be successful is being really, really clear, but also you need to get on with them. They need to be an augmentation of your team. They need to feel like part of it. Because I think otherwise what can happen is consultants can do some really fantastic work, come back and present it, but the adoption of it isn't quite there. So you really need to have consultants as part of your working group or your team or what that looks like. They need to feel ingrained in the culture and the business. It's so, so important. But also, as I say, be really clear with what they're here to do, but also be open to have that discussion with them to really refine what they can bring to the table.
Yeah, I love that point about adoption. And that's something that I always feel a pressure on as a consultant is this going to land, or are people going to look at me blank face and go, what the we can't do this? And I think when you've got an internal team like you who understands the process structure and that importance of clear communication, it makes it so much easier to know when you overstep the boundary and being told, hey, look, fine, but that's not part of the remit. Stay on track, because then it helps you to deliver something that is relevant. And you're right, being closely ingrained with these stakeholders is so important to build the trust and the relationship, so that when you present something back, it's not from scratch, right? There's an interim stages where people are being brought on the journey with you.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I think, by having consultants work with you, in my experience, like actually be in the office with you, sitting with you, if it's a couple of days a week, they get to know the business a lot more. So I think it's about how you basically do see them as an extension of your team, and how you can really support them in that kind of induction process that you would put new staff through. How do you extend that out to them as well?
I know how I miss those days of early morning coffees at the shack down in Havant. So let's go to my next question, which is around tools and processes, because having worked with lots of different businesses, there is no consistency in toolkit, or the fundamental processes are about how people execute them differ. So what is your go-to toolkit for project management? What are your most important processes, like, in terms of communication cycles, meetings, etc.?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's evolving, it's changing, and it is changing all the time. So, I'm a Jira nut inside out. I love Jira. But I have been getting into Craft.io recently and exploring that. So, and I think that's only right to do. Like you would a product that you're managing, you should also be looking at the technology that you're using, the tools that you're using, and always kind of seeing whether there's improvements or better ones out there on the market for you. So Jira, Trello, Miro, anything that's really collaborative. So most of my team work remotely. So something that can keep us all to account, allow us to collaborate really well in one safe space is really, really important. And roughly, I use quite a lot of stuff from Scrum. So we have stand-ups, daily stand-ups, and that's really, really important because, yes, you can have the right tools, but you need to be talking around those tools together. And I think just having conversations, whether it's 5 or 10 minute blocks 3 times a week or daily, it's just really, really helpful to make sure that everyone's keeping on track. We really understand what those blockers are. And then also, your product managers can then help to remove those as quickly as possible. We have also, in the past, I've done things like design sprints and accelerator sessions as well. And I think they can be really, really powerful, where you want a short, sharp burst of focus in one particular area and to see some really great traction within a short time frame. So massive advocate of embedding those within the business, and something that I'm hoping to do within B&Q within the next 6 months. But also things like steer codes, they do help. And I know there's probably a point of another steer code, but it really does help to kind of pull your stakeholders together and get answers to those questions that are really, really important. But it is just about communication. And that's the most important thing, I think, about being a really great project manager or product manager. It is all about communication. It's about people coming along on the journey with you, being fully aware of what that vision and journey and experience looks like, and working together collaboratively to do so. So, if your communication skills are lacking, you're really going to struggle in this area.
Yeah, I love those small get-togethers, which are not just, hey, I fired out an email, because I find in some projects I get really frustrated where clients don't want to use a collaboration tool. They might not use anything like a Slack or a Trello. And then you say, right, we need to have a weekly 15-minute stand-up. Oh, no, well, we don't really do meet. And it's really hard to build relationships in a project when all you're seeing is an email coming through with answers. And you're like, oh, come on.
So hard. I've had an experience recently where, I think some people that I'm working with, we've said, well, how have you got on with this task? Oh, I didn't get anything back on email, sent email back out, I got no response. I was like, call them, just have a chat with them. And I think sometimes we can hide behind our emails. And just stepping out and having a chat with someone, pretty old school, but it works.
Yes. I'm old school. You can tell by the amount of grey in my beard, so it's all good. I embrace it thoroughly. Something I found interesting. You're saying now you're in current role. I think you said you had a team of 5 reports and a total team of 21, but you mainly work remotely. And there'll be some people listening who are used to remote working, others who aren't. And I definitely know people who have got a little bit of nervousness about how you can make project teams work remotely, given the fact that it's such like fast paced, so many tasks, actions, and so many things to keep an eye on, so many variables that can impact the success. What is your advice? How do you make it work remotely so that you maintain that cohesion of the team?
I think we're very, very lucky in that we have got a director that is very, very supportive of hybrid working. So our teams typically come into the office twice a month, minimum, to collaborate. And it is about collaboration. So we use those times when we're together to collaborate, to learn from each other, to focus on areas and for kind of improving team dynamics. That's the focus of when we come together. And it's interesting when we've had sessions such as that, where we're focusing, collaborating, when we go back to our desk, everyone's sitting there focused on their desk and typing away. So they're not kind of interacting outside of those sessions in a way that you would expect if you're in the office. But the success of it is really because we communicate really well. So we are constantly on Microsoft Teams. We use Miro to be able to collaborate externally together as well. So it's okay if we're not in the same room. We do breakouts as well through Teams. I think it's just about having really effective communication, and that's what it does come down to. But also I think having a clear set of principles in terms of expectations for everyone. How do we expect you to kind of present yourself and behave and work together? And I think, the teams really do take that and they take it forward. It's been working really, really well for us. And as I say, when we do come together, it's really, really powerful because it is focused and it's delivering what we need it to do at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I was chatting to somebody else the other day who asked me about like how do you maintain remote teams and make sure they're working well. I said one of the things that people need to think about more is the recruitment side, because there are people who don't like what they perceive to be the isolation of remote working and want to have more time in an office. And you need to be really clear on the kind of personality profile of who will fit into that team and work seamlessly. Yeah.
And, it's different at the moment in B&Q. You've got some teams that are in 5 days a week in the office, and then you've got other teams like ours that are a little bit more remote and come in when needed. And so I think it is very, very different, and it will depend on your role and I think the requirements of the role. But I do have members in my team that come in 5 days a week and still sit in the office, even though the rest of the people aren't there, because they like to be out of their home. They like to have that environment. So I think it's having the options for people so that they can work in the best way that suits them.
Yeah, nice. Let's now flip onto the product roadmap bit. This is an area that I
Yeah.
have a personal huge amount of interest in because it's critical to most of the projects I work on. And people do things differently. Like some people just have an Excel spreadsheet of a list of here's the stuff we're working on, and I prioritize it 1, 2, 3. Others are using proper product management toolkits to plan out their roadmap and split it between strategic and tactical. And so many ways you can do this. So what is your planning framework and toolkit? What does managing a product roadmap look like for you?
So I give you an example. So coming into B&Q, the first couple of things that I did was think about what our product strategy is and vision for the next couple of years. It needs to have some sort of foundation to build upon. So we're working through what that looks like. Once you've got that very clear view of this is what I want to try and achieve this year and probably for the next 3 years, it gives you something to aspire to. And then you can start breaking it down. So then I would start breaking it down, kind of talking to your third parties, finding out what's on their roadmaps, what's coming down their line as well, what's happening within the market to build up a view of where you might need to get to and those kind of milestones within that kind of period that you might need to hit. And that will give you a really clear view in terms of what's coming that you need to focus on, but also look at your data. So understand where your weaknesses and strengths lie and, pull out that SWOT analysis and really understand areas that you probably are lacking in that you need a bit of focus on. Once you've got all of that, you can then define what your pillars and levers are within that to support your strategy. And, it could be 5 pillars that you're focusing on. And then you can create, what I like to do is create work streams for each of those pillars. So, okay, I've got an overall goal that I want to try and achieve. But what are the elements within that are going to build up to that KPI or that strategy that I've put forth? And do you know what? I don't do this alone. I like to do it with my team because I have ideas, but so does everyone else that I work with, and they have really valid ideas and different viewpoints. So I, at this point, like to have a bit of an ideation session. So where I would talk people through the strategy and the pillars, and this is what we want to try and achieve, and these are the KPIs and the OKRs that we want to go after. Let's break that down into what we think we can do in this area. What are the problem statements that we're seeing? How can we fix those? And that's like a multidisciplined ideation session. So I have people from tech in there, I have frontline in there, I have people from design, and it's about bringing those people all together and collaboratively coming up with some ideas of what you want to deliver that year that all then tie into your pillars and your strategy effectively. So tons of post-its, Sharpies galore, and it really can help you to drive out some really good nuggets and diamonds that you can deliver throughout the year. And then I just sort of work out how we plot those through effectively.
How do you handle, I'm going to use a really nebulous term deliberately, innovation, which means things to different people, because some things are it's very rarely genuine innovation. But I've worked with a few businesses where sat and advise them, and they wanted to like test and improve things, but they always get caught by, here's our core roadmap, we don't have the resource. Getting them to hive off a percentage of their development resource for piloting new ideas, concepts that might never get to full release, might not work, but they'll never ever learn from it if they don't do it. How do you approach that ability to do the core stuff that you've got to do, but also to test new things that might or might not work?
So how I've done it in the past is you have to build its own work stream for experimentation and proof of concepts and innovation, if you want to term it that way. It needs its own house. It needs its own path to run, because the problem is when you push it into the rest of the demand that you've got with all the development teams, innovation is the one thing that always gets squeezed, I find, and experimentation. It always gets squeezed and it gets lost. So you need to carve its own path. It needs its own resources. And you need a senior leadership team that really kind of buy in to how important experimentation and innovation is and what that could lead to. So typically within my roadmaps and within my strategies, it's always its own piece. And then I build that out, that resource to support it, give it its own lease of life. And I think that depends on where you are in terms of digital maturity and where you sit on that scale. As to how set up you are to do that. But it's important, I think, to really give it those wings.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And typically it is in a more mature business that's got its e-com strategy to a certain stage where they can then push forward. So next question is around prioritization. And again, this I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly, where we talked about Moscow briefly earlier, where everything's a must, because if you ask a stakeholder responsible for one part of the business, generally all of their things they want are high priority. What is your approach to having like consistent criteria for defining what's a priority, what's not, and then making sure that that doesn't just get lost when there's a scramble for everyone chucking items into development queues?
So it's so important to create what I call a front door for change and demand, because I think the problem is where you have multiple pieces of or requests coming in from multiple places. If they're not all pulled together and made sense of, it's really, really hard to manage the priority of those. So you've got to create what I call my front door. And I use as well kind of a bespoke weighted scoring method. So I find that's the best way, because then you can tailor it to the business that you're in at that time. So Moscow is fantastic, but it might not reflect the needs. And to your point, James, like you've got different stakeholders and all of them are musts for them. So things like effort, cost, benefit, risk, all of that stuff, and change the weighting depending on the business. And you can reflect on that as well. And it might change throughout the year because your needs change. But creating that weighted scoring is a really great way of then going, okay, taking into account all of these things that matter to every single person. You are presenting your change. You're feeding into that. This gives me the overall list. This gives me the overall priority. I do like to sometimes give a bit of a boost to directors. So if they disagree with the priority scoring, they can give it a boost of 10 points, try and push it up a little bit if they feel they need to. Can't do it all the time. It's on a case-by-case basis. But that just really, really helps. And I think if you've got a real clear list and a view of, and everyone is signed up to, this is how I prioritize. These are the things that I'm prioritizing on. And this is why my change is in this position. That's really, really helpful. If everyone's signed up to that process, that's where it can be really, really strong. It falls down, of course, if people don't all sign up to that, if people are sending demand in through back routes. You need to be really, really strong in how you accept demand, but also what your definition of ready is and how you assess that.
Yeah, I think that's really sensible. You have to, there is an element of school teacher to this, to be honest, because when you, especially if the process isn't robust and not everyone is used to doing that, they've had a wild west where people are emailing their mates in development and going, hey Joe, can you get this sorted? You have to put people down, and you have to politely reinforce it and say, look, we are working this process. Your work will not get done if you go down that route. It takes a little bit of time, doesn't it, sometimes to get people aligned.
Exactly. I always use the analogy of it's like sending firemen to a burning house, and you want them to go where the fire is hottest rather than be dispersed throughout the house. And effectively, that's what a good weighted scoring method can really deliver, is that kind of that view of this is where we need to focus and bring in everyone together.
Excellent. So we've had the Peppa Pig muddy puddles, and we've had the firemen in the hottest burning places. I can't believe the next analogy. This is great.
I've got tons.
Do a separate episode on bad e-commerce analogies in project management. There we go. Another question around, because you touched upon this earlier about experimentation, like MVPs, testing, rollouts. What is your about? When do you decide to just deliver something? Right, we need to get it delivered. It's been full build. Off we go. We test it. We release it. Versus, actually, we should pilot it live with an MVP. Learn, deciding whether we do a full rollout or whether we need to tweak. What's the decision criteria for which path you take?
Do you know what? I think it's an involvement, because my firm believing is that a good 80% of all the change that we do should go through some form of testing, really. And if it's hygiene, okay, fair enough. If it's, or if it's a regulatory change and you have no choice in that matter, absolutely do it out there. But if it's not, then I think you should be looking at some mechanism of validating before you commit to code, whether that be A/B testing, whether that be guerrilla testing, lab testing, whatever, tree testing. I think there's so many different options on the table for you to explore something before you commit to code to make sure you're doing the right thing. So I would love to get to 80% where I am at the moment. I think we're a little bit further away from that. But I think if you can channel that as part of the process in validating where you commit to code and having that as as kind of part of your core process, it can be really, really powerful. So make sure that you're doing the right things and that you are really aligned to the needs of your business and customer.
Yeah, cool. Makes perfect sense. Final question for you is, I have loads, but also I don't want you to pass out from over questioning. Is the roadmaps aren't static. We all know it. You can have a strategy, you can have your pillars, then some curveball comes in and you go, right, we got to pivot. What's your advice on the cycle for reviewing and updating it? Like, how often do you need to fundamentally review it at strategy level versus just doing tactical tweaks on a ticket by ticket basis?
I mean, in terms of overall strategy, I typically check in every quarter because I think things are changing so fast and changing all the time that it's important that you do that check-in quite regularly. So I think strategically, quarterly, absolutely. Tactically, all the time. Absolutely all the time. I change my roadmap weekly. It's super, super organic, and it really reflects the needs of the business and the needs of customers at that point in time. We have multiple data sources coming in all the time. We're always looking at that and reflecting and revising our roadmaps off the back of that, looking externally, going to trade shows, understanding what's out there in the market. And I think that's healthy because digital is really, really fast. And if we say, okay, we're going to look at our roadmap every half year, that's too late. So I think you need to be really open to changing that. And I think sometimes you can get a little bit, I guess, too aligned and you don't want to change your roadmap. That's your decision. That's your plan. You don't want to make any movement there. But I think to be a really strong product manager, you need to be really open to it. Because, expectations change all the time. A curveball comes down the line all the time. So you need to be best poised to really respond to that as much as possible.
Yeah, I think typically that's what I see is quarterly reviews. That's normally what I advise. Yeah. And then, if something comes in that's a massive hurdle, you just have to put an interim cycle and deal with it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if things were just consistent and you didn't have all this disruption? But that's not life in the technology world.
I don't think it would be great. I honestly don't, because then I think that life is too predictable, and life isn't predictable, right? So I honestly think that if you haven't changed your roadmap in 12 weeks, you should be taking a good hard look at your roadmap, because it probably means that you've missed something that you should be probably responding to.
Yeah. I do agree to some point, but sometimes I just wish that the velocity of curveballs would just reduce that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, if you've got a really robust way of prioritizing stuff, then it might be a curveball, but it might not be a curveball for right now. So it might be something that you have to factor in for, the following quarter. But it doesn't mean it's going to hit you right this second and your team's right this second. So I think as a product manager, you feel that, don't you? And you kind of manage that so that it doesn't always hit the team and they don't feel like they're continually pivoting. Yeah.
Yeah. Having a process to react to chaos so that chaos doesn't dismantle all your carefully prepared projects. Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Kaylie, I've really enjoyed that. I mean, I knew I'd enjoy doing this episode because I've really enjoyed working with you and learned a lot from you. So thanks so much for taking the time. I know that the people listening will have got a lot from it.
Great. Perfect. Thanks so much. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah. And for everyone else listening, I hope you enjoyed it as well. Reach out with any questions you got. Make sure you're following Inside Commerce on LinkedIn and subscribe to our Inside Commerce newsletter that drops every 2 weeks. Take care, everyone. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.